Thank you so much. So now we are recording online. So we are studying today a special text for Hanukkah that probably a story that all of you know, but still it's something different to read from the source and to learn and to understand and try to see different aspects of that. And we will open, of course, Masechet Chanukah, right? Where do we find Masechet Chanukah? The answer is it's a trick question, so don't try to answer. There is no Masechet Chanukah. We don't have a tractate for Chanukah. We don't have, just as we have to every other holiday. Like we don't have any holiday except Shavuot doesn't have, like Bikurim has, but not Shavuot. So you have aspects of Shavuot there. But in general, we have usually to every Chag, we have a tractate for itself, and Chanukah is lacking that. If I would ask you before we go in, where do you think Chanukah will be placed? If you'll need to decide, then now that we don't have a tractate for Chanukah, where will we find the Talmud discussions about Chanukah and what Chanukah is? What would you think? Those of you who know, don't answer. But in a second, if no one tried, then I'll start pointing people. So come out. Try. Cecilia, I can see you are trying to say, but you need to unmute.
Yes, I know. I think it's about the history books when the Greeks are in Palestine.
But which tractate in the Talmud have these things? Because now you talked about the Maccabee books that in
Yes.
principle we're not supposed to learn at all because there are those books who are what we call Sfarim Chitzoniyim. How do you say Sfarim Chitzoniyim in English?
I think so. We're left outside, though.
Yeah, no, but they have a name. The scripture that are not part of the Tanakh.
Apocryphic books or something like that.
Yeah.
Where?
So the Maccabee books that you're not supposed to read and learn, and of course that's why everyone learned them. But there are books that are not part of the Talmud. They are completely different books. The history aspects. So which tractate? Tatiana, I can see you want to answer. Liora, are you trying?
I'm sorry, I have no idea. I just assume it's like post-Greek, like,
But
invasion.
all the Talmud is post-Greek.
Exactly, so I have no idea which exactly it is.
Yes, Flo.
Shabbat.
There's Masechet
Shabbat. Why Shabbat?
In Masechet Shabbat, about the mitzvot.
Yeah. You're the answer is right. But why does Shabbat connect to Hanukkah?
Why does Shabbat?
I don't know.
Because the Hanukkah candles, weren't they lit for Shabbat, or?
Because of the lighting the candles when it's Shabbat and
Exactly.
Hanukkah at the same time.
So it's not because of the discussion of how do you do when Hanukkah and Shabbat goes together, but it comes from a discussion about the similarities and differences between Shabbat candles and Hanukkah candles. So this is a place where all discussions of Hanukkah comes. So it means that all Hanukkah studies go in the aspect of candle lighting. That's the angle where Hanukkah comes in. And let's dig immediately into the study of the Masechet and let Rav Shmuel take over and explain those. So here I'll share the. Yes. So you can see it's Talmud Masechet Shabbat 21b.
Thank you very much, Rav Yair. I think this is one of those instances where you have to pay attention very much, not just to what is said, but also very much to what is not said in the following text. You mentioned very interesting points, the Book of the Maccabees, other historical writings, Josephus. It's actually interesting. Hanukkah is the holiday which probably has the most historic sources outside of the Tanakh or Talmud or any Jewish sources. But the Talmud, as we mentioned, does not have a tractate on it. It actually has very little information. It has a few pages, as you mentioned, that comes a little bit on as a side point. The Gemara is discussing the lights of Shabbat, and then it goes on a tangent to discuss certain things related to the candles of Hanukkah. In the middle of this discussion of candle of Hanukkah, the Gemara starts, as we read here, "Ma Hanukkah." What is Hanukkah? Yeah. So you're not going to find my Pesach, you're not going to find my Purim, you're not going to find these type of questions in the Talmud, because all the other festivals were very clear what they were, right? The Chagim which are written in the Torah, of course, are written in the Torah. Purim is written in the Tanakh. But Hanukkah, there's no book that was accepted into the Tanakh about it. So what is this Hanukkah? The sages taught on the 25th of Kislev, the days of Hanukkah are 8. One may not eulogize, hesped, lemispad. Eulogize means to give a speech in honor of a dead person, like a sad speech. And one may not fast on them. Okay, so it's days when you're not allowed to fast, you're not allowed to eulogize.
Yeah. I was sure that this comes as a quotation for what is called Megillat Ta'anit, that was like the most ancient text that we actually find, and mentioned some other places. It was maybe the thing that is between the Tanakh and Mishnah time, like some kind of a scripture that comes from within between these times, before Mishnah, prior to Mishnah, and post Tanakh, post biblical time. And this Megillat Ta'anit is a list of different dates in the year that you're not allowed to misped, not allowed to eulogize and fast. Funnily, one of these days is high holidays.
Right. Okay. So right, very good. So this is really comes as a detail, as a few days, which happy days in to a certain extent, not great happy days. We're not saying you have to make a big party and you have to make a special meal, nothing like that. Just no eulogizing, no fasting. Maybe a little bit. I'm just thinking what we could compare it to. You have certain days when certain happy things happen to a community somewhere. It's even less than Rosh Chodesh, really, because the new moon, Rosh Chodesh, at least is mentioned. You should have a nice meal. It doesn't say much.
It's a bit like the list we have that makes us very happy. Religious people who pray in minyan every day know the feeling of that you come to the list of the dates where you don't say Tachanun. And that, like, oh my God, great. We saved like 30 seconds in our prayer. And it's amazing the feeling of, yes, today is the day that is, you don't say Tachanun. We didn't think about it before. These are like the list of these dates are maybe similar to that feeling. Shmuel, I can see you smile, right? You identify with this feeling, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good, interesting point. Like there are many days like this which are not really celebrated in any other way except not saying Tachanun and not. So you have Tu B'Shvat, you have Tu B'Av, which most people will not even notice if it wasn't for the fact that you're meant to skip Tachanun. So it seems to be that Hanukkah is just one of those days on the list. When the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled all the oils that were in the sanctuary. And when the Hasmonean monarchy, when the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious over them, they searched and found only one cruse of oil that was placed with the seal of the high priest. And there was oil there to light only for one day. A miracle occurred and they lit for 8 days. The next year they instituted those days and made them holidays with Hallel and Thanksgiving. So here is, you would say, Hanukkah in a nutshell, but that's what it is. It's a day when the when the Greeks, it's very interesting, it tells us, doesn't tell us much of the context, what was this and when, but it seems to be everybody knew there was a time when the Greeks entered the sanctuary, they defiled the sanctuary, the Hashmonaim overcame them, and they found this little pach shemen, this cruse of oil with the seal of the high priest, and there was only one day and it burned for 8 days. And a year later, they decided, okay, we'll celebrate this from now on every year, Hallel, Thanksgiving, Hodah. Okay. That's it. So now, I'm not going to ask you, what do you see in this text? I think, is there something that you feel that's quite essential to Hanukkah that's missing from this text? Let's say you were asked today to write a little text, a little article, Hanukkah in a nutshell. Do you think there's something missing here that you would maybe write, you would write and you would stress? Can somebody notice that something quite important is missing here?
Are you asking me or are you asking the
I'm asking the
other
students.
students?
Talmidim. We're all students. I'm also learning.
We're all students, exactly. Because some of the things that caught me in the text is the not only the historical lack of history, but also the history incorrect things that are written here. Maybe the best part is it says Malchut Beit Hashmonai, that the Hasmonean monarchy won over them. The Hasmonean monarchy didn't exist. Because the Hasmonean at that time, they were a family of priests, a family of Kohanim, not a family of kings. It's only late after all the epistles, but that's like a side.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So it's not. It seems we were not stressing here the history so much, and you're right. We're using a word which came later to
if they delivered this
earlier.
If the Talmud, if the rabbis who wrote it would have delivered it to me as a history teacher, I would give them a C-, which is the question, what is Chanukah, right? My Chanukah. So that's why I urge you to continue to what Rav Shmuel said. If people would ask you, what is Chanukah? Which answer would you have given that will give you an A in?
It's more a commemoration because it's not coming from God. It's it's not like Pesach or Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur that when you need to go to the temple. No.
So what do you explain? So one is you say the Hanukkah is not a Chag that has a religious.
It's a Chag, but it's not one of these Chag that people went to Jerusalem to celebrate in the time of the temple.
But when the temple was in Jerusalem, Hanukkah was a feast. And right?
And how do you know, Tikva? You've been there?
I read. I don't remember. I read it. There was a Hanukkah in the temple.
But it's not one of these that you.
Yes.
There is some. I think it's the tabernacle is Posk, and I'm very bad at this.
What you write, Paula,
I want to say that it's not one of these that they were supposed to go, like Pesach, Sukkot, and which one?
Shavuot. It's not one of Shalosh Regalim, the three time that you're supposed to go to the temple. You're right.
Hanukkah it's not even a Yom Tov. I think we can do.
Yes, exactly. It's not a Yom Tov. Hanukkah is not a Yom Tov. It's Hanukkah and Purim are the two high holidays that are not from the Torah. They're from the Derabanan. It's from the rabbis. It's not from the Torah, no doubt. Like there's no question that they're level. And of course, it's not Yom Tov. It's not. There's no Isur Melacha. We're allowed to light candles. We're allowed to do it. So you're right that this is a less important. But I would maybe continue to, as Rav Shmuel started, we don't have the words my Chanukah on any other, like what is this holiday on any other? And that gives me an opening to the question, Tikva, was it celebrated in the temple? How, or if it was celebrated, how much was it celebrated, or was it a small thing that was mentioned, or was it just a factual aspect that came a few years and then everyone forgot about it? So the Mishnah has to ask, well, what is Hanukkah? We have something here, but what is it about? We don't know. It's like it's not something we celebrate so much. It's a question. We don't know how much Hanukkah was celebrated at that time. There's no doubt that no one got presents and Hanukkah geld and all of that. These tradition that we have today. We did have rules that are connected to Hanukkah, that Bet Hillel and Shammai, about lighting the candles. So we had candle lighting at the time of the temple. That or at least if not in the time of the temple, a bit afterwards, because Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. So something existed, but not sure if it was in the temple. Not sure how much it was.
I think I want to stress the word commemoration. As one of you mentioned here, that you commemorate. It's not something. What do you commemorate on Hanukkah? What are you remembering? What do you think when you celebrate Hanukkah? Why are you celebrating it? What do you remember? What do you think about?
Seeing miracles.
Miracles. Okay, very good. What miracles? I'm just trying to get to a certain point here. What miracles are you thinking about? You think about Hanukkah. What big miracles happened? We say it in the blessing, right? It made miracles for us in these days, at this time, in those days. Well, what were those miracles? What happened? I think you all know the answer. I'm just trying to see how, if you appreciate how the Talmud is in many ways quite original here, not what me and you would have said.
But you can say, Av Shmuel, you can maybe help. I can see that the
Jewish people survived. Thank you very much. From Pauline to thank you very much. The Jewish people survived again. Yes, that's what I would have done if I would have answered. I think most of us. Yes, there is a beautiful story of the flask of oil that burned for 8 days, but before that, I would say that the Jewish people remained alive, right? The Greeks wanted to. They told us either you accept their religion and way of life, or you get killed, and lots of Jews assimilated and disappeared, and Judaism remained, and the temple was, and it was we say in our prayers, Rabim be'ad me'atim, a huge Greek army was destroyed by this small Jewish group. It was a complete miracle. That is what I would have thought is what Hanukkah is all about, right? So the story of the oil, most of us, it's a nice story, maybe even very good, winning the Greeks and their ideology. This is exactly what I would have thought is what Hanukkah is about. And the story of the flask of oil seems like, you have a cake, it's a cherry on top of the cake, It was a sign maybe from God that
or a good story for the children.
Yeah, good story.
It's like a bonus.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting that the Gemara doesn't talk about it. It just mentions here, like you said, the Hasmonean monarchy overcame them and emerged victorious over them. It sounds like
it's not even that. Even that is at the side. When that happened, came the miracle. Not it happened and it was great and we celebrate that and we had a miracle. No, when the Hasmonean won against the Greek, then happened the amazing story of the oil. Like it's a side mentioning. Yes, we won the war. There was something about winning a war, but leave it aside. That's not the story.
So it's a really interesting piece of Gemara, and a lot has been talked about it over the centuries. I think what's interesting and what's quite important to realize is there's a lot of miracles in the Tanakh, in the Talmud, in Jewish history. There are many stories and legends, and some of them are maybe truer than others, but either way, there's a lot of miracles going around. So we don't have a chag for every miracle at every moment. So the whole concept is a bit interesting, that we should make 8 days of celebration with candles. Because what? Because of some oil that burned for 8 days is in itself very strange, you know. Somebody was saying, you can find a miracle of when Yeshua stopped the sun in Ayalon, in a fight. Yeah? You can find the day we crossed the Jordan River. I don't even know which day of the calendar these days are, you know. You could have a long list of Chagim if you made a Chag for every single miracle. So it would seem quite obvious there's something bigger going on here. There was like we said, there is a continuation of the Jewish people. I remember I have my Rosh Yeshiva in Yeshiva, Gurvitz. He was always very interested in obscure sources which are not very well known, and he knows a lot of midrashim, and he dug a very strange midrash that says that once it happened in the temple that the little drop of oil burned for a year or two. So maybe according to that midrash, Chanukah was nothing. There were much bigger miracles going on in the temple the whole time. So it seems to be that the rabbis of the Talmud are on purpose deciding, let's talk about these candles. Let's talk about this oil, right? Let's not talk too much, about the war and who won. And it was quite funny. I was teaching some children, and I was using some material I took from somewhere online. I was teaching in the school here a bit, and then one of the questions in the material was name the 5 children of Mattias, Kohen Gadol. And I thought, I can't name them. And I started thinking, maybe I remember from a lesson years and years ago as a kid or something. It's not something we discuss very much, the history. And unless you start reading the book of the Maccabees, like you said, but in the actual classic Jewish books that are studied, Talmud, there isn't really that much interest in this. And I think it seems the rabbis are purposely choosing not to stress it.
You can hesitantly even say that they are not very keen of Bet Hashmonai. The rabbi were very had lots of criticism of this house of Bet Hashmonai and the king there later. So it's not a love story. It's a story of this kingdom that finishes with the Herod and that marries one of Miriam Hashmonait to get legitimacy, and in many ways led to some of the decisions they made. Also led to the destruction of later to the destruction of the temple. Bet Hashmonai are not seen as the great heroes of Jewish tradition.
So yeah, exactly. So the Hashmonaim were not such examples. So it seems to me we don't want to put too much stress on this. Now, there's a lot of explanations why this text and this. There's a lot of talk about why in other places we do. If you open your Siddur, Bezrat Hashem, in a few more days, it'll be Chanukah in a week. You will read your Siddur from the Siddur, and you'll say the text in the Amidah, and you'll see there it says
in Birkat Hamazon,
in the Amidah, we add Al Nisim, and we say, the weak ones were defeated, the strong ones were defeated by the weak ones. It's all about the war and the battle and how Hashem saved us. So there's a lot of explanations. I know there's, for example, the Maharal of Prague, who is maybe more well known for the Golem of Prague. It's funny, my wife was just in Prague in a conference a week ago. It's funny because everybody talks about Rabbi Lov of Prague. They know the legend of the Golem, that he created some sort of monster. The truth is, his literature was not Kabbalistic or mystical so much in his style at all. So much more philosophical and maybe even a little bit rational. So,
and he didn't know anything about any golem. He didn't hear of the golem he created.
Yeah. So either way, he actually discusses this and says a very interesting idea that the rabbis chose to stress this miracle, the oil and the candles, because the idea of the military and the army can easily become a cult of like heroes, and you have it in many countries. You have these heroes that are celebrated for their victories and their fights and so on, and you could lose the idea that at the end of the day it was God's miracle. So maybe on purpose the Chachamim said, let's light candles, let's remember this oil that burned, let's remember that it was really God who helped us, and it wasn't because of our amazing strategy and our amazingly well-trained army and so on. I really was thinking about this because a lot of the Hanukkah songs that are modern Israeli songs, they're not the old songs, they actually talk a lot about the heroic Maccabees, and I realized later, I didn't understand as a child, but I realized later the story of Hanukkah, the Maccabees, was very nice for the early Zionists, because it was all about these Jews who can do something else than being accountants and lawyers. They can be fighters and they can be heroes. So it's quite interesting. But the Chachamim and the Talmud were actually sort of trying to avoid that and talk more about God and the miracles. I myself was thinking a little bit in a different direction, that if Hanukkah is only a historical day of something that happened 2,300 years ago, it wouldn't maybe deserve the same type of honor that we give it, because many things happen in history, but what's that got to do with me? I remember once there was a rabbi here who a long time ago was giving a whole shiur, and then he said, visitor, and he was saying, and somebody said, well, wait a second, Hanukkah, we won the battle, but we lost the war, because 200 years later, the Romans came and the second temple was destroyed. So what are we celebrating? So I think maybe also the rabbis are trying to give you something eternal, yeah? That it's not just about this specific victory, but there's a message here. If God is with you, he'll help you. You try to do the right thing. You try to find the pure oil, and he will help you, however difficult it might be. These are just my thoughts, what I see in this piece of Gemara. I will be really interested in hearing Rabbi Jair and everybody today in this virtual Bet Midrash.
I very much agree with the same direction, that it brings God into the picture and giving the miracle, like focusing on the miracle. And of course, we have to add also, when we talk about the historical aspects, that those of you who read the books of the Maccabees, none of the books that tells the story of Hanukkah heard of this miracle, which is quite surprising. It's because they wrote many details about the war and about coming back to the temple and all of that. They not Maccabim Aleph, Maccabim Bet, not Sefer Yehudit, all the books that were written in that time, none of them heard of a miracle that was connected to oil, and so that even emphasizes even more the story. So if the rabbis created an alternative story that maybe historically didn't even, I'll be careful to say it, I hope no one will hold it against me, maybe not even happened, it makes it even more. So why do that? And that is a statement to say this is the main aspect we want to celebrate. We choose to celebrate this, maybe to avoid saying other things that you celebrate. Maybe at this time, others did celebrate other aspects of Hanukkah. Maybe there was a nationalistic atmosphere around people who were very keen about Jewish strength and Jewish resistance and Jewish, I don't know, you can add whatever you want. And the rabbis come and says, stop with all these military strength stories, out of them. No, we celebrate the miracle of the oil. We don't celebrate any of these. Keep these stories to other people. We're not into these things. And it's a very strong messaging that they bring, choosing this direction. Flo, Eric, I don't know who of you wanted to talk.
No, but unmute. Yeah, there we go. There's also that kind of thought that, like, one of the reasons why it wasn't chosen to be part of the canon and why it is interpreted in a way that it's kind of made about the oil is that they wanted to cull sort of like emerging messianic notions or ideas, because it would have been a character that kind of was Judah Maccabee, that was not a rabbi, that was not a teacher, that was not in any way sort of part of the the tradition of scholars, but someone that was a soldier, someone that came at a time where the people were really, really weak, and somewhat would have been standing there as a savior in that story.
So are you trying to say that the rabbis tried to avoid competition with the secular,
Not competition, I mean, but
important people?
At a time with little hope, when these kind of things happened, and even further down in the timeline when other figures kind of like emerged in history that kind of proclaimed to be the Messiah, like, some people were receptive for it. I mean, the first Christians were Jews, then there was the whole Shabbatite Tzvi thing. I mean, yeah.
And they didn't know of Shabtai Tzvi, but they did know a false Messiah. So that the story of Bar Kochva that was seen as a Messiah and brought to the biggest destruction. And he was in many generations not remembered well until the Zionism came and created him again as a great hero. We need to tell stories about the story of people fighting, and not stories of miracles of God, which strengthens even more. This emphasizes this message that you say, and they decided different stories. So we have here a fight maybe between a secularism of Jewishness and maybe the vice versa, a rabbinical reading of not at all, no secular state, not we don't celebrate anything regarding the human fight and such. We just commemorate the miracle. So maybe you have here like a different fight to do different directions. And surprisingly, those who come and change that, for example, the Rambam Maimonides, who underlines the importance of the Israeli independence as what we celebrate. Rambam comes against the Talmud tradition and try to bring in the aspect of that we had. Why do we celebrate Hanukkah? Because we had almost 200 years of Jewish independence in Israel, and that is a celebration. And he says that without any sources, like he doesn't rely on any sources from Talmud and Mishnah to say that. So here we do have rabbis who try to bring Judaism back. I would say maybe in a way there are rabbis who sees Judaism as something to belongs to the skies, belongs to spirituality, and not belongs to any. It's about our relations with God. It's a Yerushalayim Shel Mala. It's like all of a philosophical aspect, not so much a reality. And then you have those who are completely secularized, not in the terms of non-believers, but in a term of connecting to Chol, to the earth, to reality of life, reading Judaism from that way. And then you have some people try to connect both of them. And I think in many ways, Hanukkah is actually exactly a high holiday that connects all these things together. If we decide to read all of them, we can choose to follow Talmud and say only the miracle. We can choose to take the books of Maccabees and Alanissim and only celebrate the fight and the independence and the righteous and all of that happened. And we can try to have some of both. I can add even when we talk about all the sources to Hanukkah, there are two more sources. One that I didn't bring, but relevant to add. I don't know how many of you thought of the question: why do we celebrate Hanukkah 8 days? Like that. That's actually a very weird question. Why 8 days?
Because of the oil?
Yeah,
It
because of the oil.
lasted
But
for
then you
8
can say,
days.
well, the miracle was only 7 days and not 8 days, because there wasn't enough oil for 1 day. So the miracle only happened 7 days. That's one answer. But they celebrate 8 days even before these stories. It's clear from the discussion of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai when you go up and down. But actually, there's a much more simple answer that is written in book of Maccabees, the second book of Maccabees, and explains that what happened is it was a technical thing. They came and like rescued and reopened the temple on the 25th of Kislev, and which means that in a long time they couldn't go to the temple. As we mentioned before, they couldn't do Aliyah LaRegel. When was it they couldn't do Aliyah LaRegel? In Chag Sukkot. That was there just before. And Chag Sukkot is the high holiday of 7 days plus 1. It finishes with Shmini Atzeret. So Sukkot is actually 8 days. And they called it, you can read in the book of Maccabees, they called Chanukah Sukkot of Kislev. It was because they couldn't celebrate Sukkot the month before, then they celebrate a nidche, a delayed Sukkot in the month of Kislev when they could, and then everyone gathered, celebrated, and had the 8 days of. So that is probably the original source of why was the Chanukah celebrated 8 days, and also connects Chanukah to Sukkot. Which is also important in many other aspects, but this is one aspect that I want to say. Another aspect comes from a completely different direction. So now, after we talk spirituality and miracles and God and Am Yisrael and fights, now we're going to a complete different place, which is Masechet Avodah Zarah, the tractate of idol worship. And in that tractate, we have a very similar. Can you all see? Yes. We have a completely different story of a high holiday of this time. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught. When Adam Arishon, the first Adam, the first man, saw that the day was progressively diminishing, he said, "Woo, woo me. Perhaps because I sinned, the world is becoming dark around me and return to the chaos and disorder. And this is the death that was sentenced upon me from heaven." He arose and spent 8 days in fasting and in prayer. Now, to explain this, why does this come in this way? Adam, according to Jewish tradition, was born when? That you do remember, right? When was Adam born? Created? And don't say year 0. I was asking about his birthday, his date, when he celebrates with the cake and
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah, yes, Tikva. Rosh Hashanah, the day of creation. And as you all know, from Rosh Hashanah until Chanukah, more or less, until 20 December 21st, 2nd, I don't remember every time. 21st. The days are getting shorter and shorter. So imagine Adam seeing the world coming to an end. Every day, the first day of creation was the day of creating the light. What was before? Darkness. And Adam sees every day more and more darkness. And he says, the world is going back to 0. This is the start of the end. And it's my fault because I sinned. I sinned, and then the world is becoming darker and darker. So he spent 8 days in fasting and in prayer. Once he saw the season of Tevet in Talmudic language is winter. Tkufat Tevet. The words in Hebrew today we use also originally we had a different one, but one of the Tkufat Tevet, Tkufat Tammuz is summer. So all the years, the season of the year are from the month that it starts from. So Tkufat Tevet is the winter that starts Tevet from the middle of Kislev. From the middle of Chanukah. Chanukah starts the 25th of Kislev and finishes the second day of Tevet. So this is the timing of Tevet. So when he came to the winter and saw that the day was progressively lengthening, suddenly he realized there's a twist. He fasted 8 days. In the end of these 8 days, the sun started to, the hours of light started to grow. Maybe he lived in Scandinavia, so it was also more visible, not like in Israel, we don't see that. But in Scandinavia, we actually feel the day that we have suddenly more light. If we have the sun and not cloud. So he sees the days are prolonged again. Once he saw the season of Tevet and saw the day with progressive lengthening, he said, "This is the order of the world." He went and observed the festival for 8 days. Have you ever heard of a festival of 8 days in the time of Tevet, more or less? And it's connected to light. Upon the next year, he observed these and ends these days of festivities he established for the sake of heaven, but they established them for the sake of idol worship. So Masechet Avodah Zarah here takes a Chag Adam HaRishon, and explains how other societies have a celebration of 8 days in the middle of the winter time, celebrating the light. Adam did it for the sake of God, and idol worships, they did it for the sake of idol worshiping. But it's the same high holiday, same aspect, same thing. Now, any one of us who goes around the streets of Scandinavia, of the Nordic countries, including Helsinki, definitely feels the atmosphere of the high holidays, which in many ways also vary in 8 days from Yule, from Christmas until New Year's Eve. 8 days of celebrations, and not only here, also all over the world. And as we read in the Talmud, also long before Judaism started imagining Chanukah. So we have here suddenly a whole different angle to this high holidays that brings in something very different. Of Shmuel, I can see you wondering about the source, and
yeah, no, it's a fascinating piece of Gemara, in many ways. I think I just was thinking about this idea. First of all, it's really interesting that he thought, yeah, Adam didn't know. He didn't know that this is the way the world works, right? So he actually really thought that this is the end of the world. It's getting darker, darker, and darker, and that's it. But then he realized, no, this is the way of the world. So he said, okay, so he'll stop fasting, he'll stop praying. But then he says, not just that, he makes a festival. So I was just trying to think, well, what exactly he's saying? He's realizing that this is the way the world works. He's realizing that God is running the world. There's seasons, there's winter, there's summer, and that's something to celebrate. And why 8 days? Also interesting.
I can also add that it looks like he says that when it says he observed both these and these days. What does it mean, both these and these? In a way, I think he meant both the days he did as a festival and the days of fasting.
Right.
Right? So he comes and say both aspects are celebrated. And also we can maybe ask when he says Amar minhago shel olam, this is the order of the world, we can here go to different directions. We can say the order of the world is that the world always work with darkness and light. But we can also say that the order of the world that he sees is that if you fast and pray, you can bring the light. He fasted and prayed, and then at the end of these 8 days, the light started to grow. And in a way, maybe it's not only doesn't only talk about the question of celebrating the day that we have more light naturally, but also this aspect of connection between us and God. That we have to celebrate both of them. We have to celebrate both the festival of the natural light that creates again, but also the days of fasting, of the power of fasting, of the power of praying, of the power of that we have to this connection. Both of them have to be remembered and celebrated. I don't know how it look. How does it? Was it 8 days of celebration of fasting and then 8 days of celebrations? I don't know what exactly the Talmud here shows, but it's something that is, in many ways, also reminds me of Purim, that we do the same, right? That we not only celebrate the days of Purim, we also celebrate the day of fasting, the Tanit Esther that we start before, that we have both. And in a way, this is maybe the essence that comes from here, the essence of the power of both the darkness and the light. That not only seeing the light, seeing the difficulties too. You have to fast. You have to remember the difficulties and the prayers and the thing that you need to correct. And you don't only celebrate the good results, you understand that the way of the world is a way of darkness and light playing together, going back and forth. Maybe this is the essence that he teaches us here in this celebration that is also the very essence of, I would say, of the biblical God, the God of light and darkness, the God of good and bad, not only the God of everything good. I always, when I debate with Christians about theological debate, I always say, why do you keep saying God is good? Like, God is good too, but he's also jealous, and he's also as a kanai. He can become angry. He can be like all the feeling that God is good. Look at the world. Is this creation good? Not only. All of that belongs to God, not only the good stuff. And that is maybe part of what Adam here really understands, in the deepness of it, that it goes together, that life and death goes together. He has an understanding of his way of doing. He thought it's a punishment, and now this is the end. And suddenly he sees, no, it's not. A punishment is not the end. The fact that he can die is maybe a source of life, and we can go to many other aspects that comes out here. But in the death we have the celebration of light in the middle of the darkness, and not as maybe just like you said before. It's a celebration of light in the time of darkness, and not celebration of life in the peak of the summer, in the peak of the light time, or in the beginning of the light time. This is in the very hard, in the time we all know, right? This is a time of depression around it. Like this is the hardest time of the year, the shortest days. I remember when I moved to Denmark, everyone were talking about, is it too cold? And only after I moved to Denmark, I realized that the problem is not the question of cold or not, but the lack of light. This is a main challenge in the winter here. And in Denmark, we have even less light than in the northern countries because they at least have snow. So the snow gives us some light. We don't even have that in Denmark. So it's and you understand how much this is a factor that means so much. But you can also see the power of this game between dark and light. And this goes far beyond a Jewish question, a miracle question, because it goes to the essence of human being, of Adam, of a relation between Adam. And the Talmud here does something amazing, because usually these things come from professors, right? Going to high holidays and explaining how this Jewish tradition was originally some pagan holiday, and then Judaism transformed it to this celebration. Or just like they do here, right? Explaining how Christmas had nothing to do with Jesus, had nothing to do with that. It's originally a pagan. This is how usually professors like to do it, right? To ruin our good story. And here it doesn't come from the professors. It doesn't come from someone who is tries to mock religion. It comes from the Talmud. The Talmud openly brings Chag Adam HaRishon and say, oh, you thought Chanukah was a Jewish thing? See in Masechet Avodah Zarah. And non-Jews celebrated long before Mattias was born, or long before any Greeks wanted to do anything against the Jews, or whatever you want to celebrate. This is in the Talmud very openly, which I feel is amazing. Like, we can really learn from Talmud regarding that. We shouldn't be afraid of these alternative explanations to what the original source. No, let's be open about it. It's and say how we use it, instead of saying no, it has to be Jewish. We have to. That is actually very nationalistic. It's not God worshiping, trying to make Judaism the ultimate best of everything, like hiding all different influence that we got from, because we all know that Chanukah today is so much influenced from the traditions around us. So we wouldn't have given gifts to our children if not the Christian gave gifts for Christmas, and we wouldn't have eaten sufganiyot if they didn't have berlina in the bakeries in the time of the time of Christmas. Of course, we are influenced by things around us. The question is, what do we do with it? It's not a big thing to point it. That's the easy part. This is what they like to do, like to mock someone. You do that, but you know that it's not at all something Jewish. No. We know. The question is what Judaism decide to do with it. This is the main question. Not try to be strong in our thing, but what does it mean, our choices, to which direction do we go? And we saw here may actually quite a few different directions to the same high holiday. Chanukah as the holiday of the miracles, of the miracle of the oil. Chanukah as the days of fighting and the secular win in the battlefield. And Chanukah as a philosophical day of light, days of a festival of Adam HaRishon. Three very different approaches to the same high holiday, to the same day that we're going to celebrate next week. And hopefully we can be inspired from, maybe instead of choosing one of them, we can do what Jewish tradition did. Take all of them or some of it. Shmuel,
Yeah,
you have some finishing words.
Amazing analysis of this very interesting Gemara. I was just paying attention now that even though this is such a different source from the previous source, there's actually really interesting similarities as well. Adam, he sees this phenomenon, then what does he see? L'shana ha'acheret. The next year, he observed both these and these days of festivity. Then we look at the previous source. It was also the same thing. right? The things happen. The oil lasts for 8 days, but there's no celebration then. A year later, they decided to hold a celebration, and the next year they instituted those days and made them holidays with Hallel and Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So I wonder
It looks as if they wanted to make the connection.
right. There's something here about the stopping and thinking and sort of analyzing even like what exactly happened last year and what's the right way to commemorate. I mean, we've gone through in the opposite way, unfortunately, this year with having to commemorate something very sad. It's October 7th happened last year, but there was so much discussion about what is the right way. Should we celebrate on Simchat Torah, where it's going to ruin the Simchat Torah? October 7th is not a Jewish date. Is that why? What should we do? And what should we mourn? Should be sad, but we have to keep going because we have to have hope. So it sort of feel like Adam Rishon had to do it with himself. He didn't have other people to discuss it with. The Hashmonaim had something to discuss. They had a group of people, I assume, who had to sit down and think, how do we celebrate this? But I thought this was actually quite a Jewish thing, but also the universal thing we think about is that I have to stop and think, what is the correct way to celebrate, and what are we celebrating, and not just have a party where so many parties and so many celebrations in the world, actually people don't know anymore what was the original reason for the celebration. So I think that's something that we can think about. Whatever the reason is for Hanukkah, it's not enough just to celebrate. You do have to think about why you're celebrating it. That was one point. Another point that came to my mind is this idea of taking something which seems to be very specific, and then looking back to something much earlier and connecting it to that. So Rabbi Jair was explaining how we sometimes recreate or ideas that already exist and give them new meaning. But I also think it's a way of showing that the so-called everything in the Torah has something deeper in it, something more spiritual in it. And even if, let's say, that the rabbis of the Talmud give one reason or one understanding, we have it very often in Halacha. There's one thing, let's say, a whole process of kosher wine and everything that's connected to it. The original problem was very simple. The non-Jews used to sacrifice wine to their gods. But then non-Jews don't do that. Very few non-Jews today sacrifice wine to gods. But we have still a whole system of kosher wine and who's allowed to touch it and under what circumstances. And then the rabbi explained it also it prevents intermarriage. And so this idea that there's a concept that's an earlier concept, but it's given new meaning, is sort of there. And the light and the darkness were there in Adam Arishon's story. They're again in the story, very similar Midrash actually that says that Hashem created the world. There was darkness. What is darkness? It's the grease. Chosher zu Yavan. There's another Midrashic source that calls the grease the darkness. It's again connecting the story of creation to the story of the Maccabim and the Hashmonaim and the Greeks. So I think it all goes back to this idea that we really want us to understand that there is more to Hanukkah than just a specific historical happening, and that's what's important. That's I think why we celebrate it still today, so many hundreds of years later.
And with these words, we should all say, have a great Hanukkah, and we'll see you. We don't have a shiur next week, but we'll see you then later on.
Okay.
Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach.
חנוכה שמח, תודה.
תודה רבה.
חנוכה שמח.
חנוכה שמח, תודה רבה על היום.
תודה רבה.